the chance to come and do this, and thanks for the great day here in Eugene. Eugene has got a long history. When I first arrived on these shores from England in the late 1980s, Eugene was like one of the top 3 model cities in the country. In the 1980s, evidently, not much was going on for cycling. I didn't mean it quite the way that sounded. In the 1970s, the last gas shock that we all had, every community got into cycling, and the US had sort of a renaissance. In the 1980s, that kind of ground to a halt, except for a few places like Madison, like Boulder, like Eugene. And rather, as you were describing the League, in the 1880s, when the League was founded, we were a big deal, and we created the Good Roads movement. You can see the petition that over 100,000 people signed it's in the Smithsonian, and periodically you can go and see this archive. We were really a big deal, and as you suggested, we sort of let things slip a bit in the 1900s, the 20th century. So we're back in the 21st century. So I think in the 90s and the first part of the 2000s, Eugene sort of let things slip a little bit, but you're back now doing some really good stuff, doing some innovative designs, and I know some of this is even going to change in the near future. But you know, 20 years ago, that simple counterflow bike lane was a big deal. Not many places were doing that. It's now become a little more standard or a little more acceptable. The idea of putting bike parking in, let alone covering it, was kind of a freakishly odd idea for a lot of communities. And roundabouts, I remember when I came here from England in the late 80s, as I mentioned, we were sick to death of roundabouts. We'd been doing them for years, and our roundabouts are like huge 3-lane, high-speed interchanges that we did everything in our power to avoid as cyclists. We would build specific bike routes and sign bike routes to avoid roundabouts, and yet little mini roundabouts and traffic circles are a very cool way of calming neighborhood traffic streets. And traffic calming was a huge thing in Europe back then, and it was like almost unheard of in the US except for a few communities. So Eugene's always been in the vanguard, and we're looking forward to seeing it back in that role in the near future. So in addition to the history, now we're back. We try and deliver on our mission in those 3 areas that Brianna mentioned. Education. How many of you, any of you League cycling instructors, or all right, just 3 of us? So we can talk about this later if you're interested, but it's a program we've had for like 35 years, and we've kept it a really, really closely guarded secret for most of those 35 years, but we're trying to make it a little more accessible, a little more open to people in the future. So, but it's got really good skills. It teaches you really important stuff about riding in traffic, and enables you to really enjoy your cycling even more. So on the advocacy side, the goal there is to make sure there are places for people to ride. A lot of that is around infrastructure and around federal funding, and making sure that we support state and local funding initiatives. But it's also about legal issues around making sure we still have a basic right to the road, and can still get the protection of the legal system when we need to. And then promotion, the third piece, is really all about giving people the incentive to get out and ride. This month is National Bike Month. We've declared that, or been the host of National Bike Month for 50-some years. So if you've got any complaints about May being too wet or too cold or too hot, then I'm the person to complain to about that. And Bike to Work Day, 3rd Friday of May, has always been for years and years and years the official Bike to Work Day. I know that Arizona does theirs in March because it's too hot by the time May comes around, and Colorado does theirs in June because it's too cold in May. So if you do yours in May, we love you to death. If not, don't worry, you do. Good. Okay, good. So that's it. It's giving people the skills, the places, and the incentive, the encouragement to actually get out and ride that we really sort of build our work around. And we, as part of the advocacy program, as some of you know, we host the National Bike Summit every year. How many of you have been to the National Bike Summit? A couple of you have. It's really our opportunity to bring people, both bike industry people and bike advocates, and professionals, planners, engineers, and such, bring them to Washington to make our case to the legislators in Washington that there should be federal funding for bike and pedestrian infrastructure, that we should be spending time and money and have policies like complete streets policies and whatever at the national level. And we were a little nervous this year about whether it was going to work or not. Things changed in Washington in November. At least some things changed. The people there changed. The mentality didn't seem to change that much. But we were worried that people were going to be really sort of dispirited coming to Washington. Not quite such a good climate for the sort of things we were talking about and want to promote. But we had a really good time. We had a record attendance. We had close to 800 people. And we met with close to 400 members of Congress and senators, and the energy and enthusiasm was really positive. And I think it's because the time is really right for the bike. It's such a simple solution to so many of the policy issues and social issues that we're dealing with that we sort of forget just how great a tool and how great an invention it really is, and what a great resource and tool and simple solution it is. So that was why we picked that as the theme for the Bike Summit this year. And it's why I want to run through 10 lessons for you tonight that I think are important to think about when you think about cycling and walking and getting to be a more bike-friendly Eugene, a more bike-friendly university. And the first lesson is never forget those benefits, the great things that people love about cycling, the reasons people do it. We really have got something that people need, that people want, whether you're an elected official, a community, a business, a university, whether you're trying to solve congestion or health issues or energy or whatever, you know the list of reasons. We've really got something people need. And we may not be the sole solution to any one of those issues, but when you add it all up, getting more people riding and walking is a pretty smart thing to do. And when more people ride, good things happen. So never forget that, and we're an important part of improving the quality of life and of creating the kind of infrastructure and community that people want and talk about. And in the meeting with the city this afternoon, one of the first questions or observations we had, or first claims of Eugene's greatness, was we've got these 5 bridges that cross the Willamette River as part of the trail system. Isn't that awesome? And it is. And it's a real indication of the value you place in your community on quality of life. And it's those values that will make Eugene a delightful place to live, but more importantly, a place where people want to move their families, want to move their businesses, want to really build a life for themselves. And so don't forget that simple truth, and don't forget to describe that and talk about that in terms of people and communities. And the reason I say that is, while we're not necessarily at odds with or fighting the highway lobby or the asphalt and concrete pourers or the motoring lobby or whatever, it's important to remember our sort of core values and attributes. And when you're talking about active transportation, as we do, it's a real benefit. There's 2 pictures that I want you to just look at for a second. And the top picture in the background, that is in 2003, when the current federal transportation bill was introduced. It was called Safe TLU, the Safe, Accountable, Flexible, Efficient Transportation Equity Act, a legacy for users. You could only dream that up in Washington. And look who's introducing it. What strikes you about the group of people that are behind the podium there? White male. Bunch of old white guys in suits, which increasingly I have less of a problem with. They're really rooted in the past. These are the Portland Cement and Concrete Association. They're the road builders, the concrete pourers, the developers in some cases, if you look at their materials and their vision, there's not a human being in their imagery, in the story that they're telling about what they want to do and what our future is like. We, by contrast, have things like the Safe Routes to School program, like the Transportation Enhancements program, like getting people out riding and walking, that's outdoors. It involves kids. It involves people smiling. It involves just people having fun. And it's a lot more saleable if we tell that story effectively than some of the other options that are out there for people. So never forget that. As we talk about cycling and walking and creating the kind of communities we want to live in, it's about people, and it's about creating communities and a sense of place, which is something we can uniquely do. And politicians, you know, they get this pretty quickly. This is the mayor of Salt Lake City opening a bike lane in September last year. And I guarantee you that if he's cutting the ribbon on a shopping center or a highway interchange or a street repaving project, they don't get that kind of crowd for that sort of event. But you talk about bikes, you talk about creating a more bikeable, more walkable community, all of a sudden people are out there, they really want to see this happen. So don't forget that essential attribute of a bicycling and walking community. So you would think that with all those benefits, with all the great things that are that you can say about cycling and walking, and the timing and gas prices going up and all the rest of it, you'd think that we were entering a fantastic time for cycling and walking, and yet it seems like we're still not quite there yet. I mean, you look at the U.S. and U.S. cities, even the best U.S. cities compared to European cities, compared to the Netherlands and Denmark, we're still not doing that well. So there's something holding us back that is stopping us from realizing the incredible potential of cycling. Obviously, in today's news and economic climate, funding is always an issue. And I'm sure the city's budget is strapped. I'm sure the state's budget is strapped. I'm sure the university's watching its pennies. But at the same time, you're spending money in the community on transportation. You're repaving and resurfacing streets. You're building stadiums and buildings and other stuff around the place, all of which you can do in a way, and for a large part you are doing in a way that makes it better for cycling and walking. So there's money being spent on the future and development of the community. So there's not really a lack of money or funding. It's really sort of a question of priority and how you spend that money that's holding us back. And at the federal level, certainly in the last 20 years, we've seen the amount of federal money available for biking and walking just increase dramatically from just a few million a year nationwide to over $1 billion, $1.2 billion in 2009. Came down a little bit in 2010 because that big increase is the stimulus money from 2009. Of which a significant percentage was spent on biking and walking. So there's money out there, and one of our jobs in Washington is to make sure that that funding continues. But there is money out there. So is it perhaps a lack of technical knowledge or best practices or case studies or just knowing what to do to create a more bikeable community? Well, it's true that you can certainly get things wrong, and people make mistakes, and you got to wonder who did this, who sort of came in second on this project. Was it did they build the ramp under the railing or put the railing over the? Anyway, clearly you can mess things up. Most communities, when they start doing stuff, manage to make a elementary mistake and put the bike lane just a little too close to the door zone or the parked cars. But there's tons of information and manuals and stuff out there to help you get this right and to... is that one Eugene? Am I using Eugene?
It's not there right
all
now.
over the country? Oh, isn't it?
There's
Damn it.
construction there.
All right. What will be there when the construction's finished?
Undecided.
Undecided?
No, it's
Shouldn't you have...
back, but it'll be... There's a hotel being built, which is why it's not there. But then we're paving the street this summer.
Okay.
So it'll be nicer pavement.
Okay. All right. I'll have to change that. I'll have to change that picture then.